Hi, welcome. And today we are going to be looking at the Middle East and North Africa as part of our walkthrough today. And as we do that, I want to remind you that we are really looking at some of the music, listening to the music and seeing some of the instruments. This is to augment or add to what you've been reading in the text. So we're in chapter 7, and you've been reading the elements of the Middle Eastern music and all of the different stuff there. So we're going to get right to it with our presentation, looking at again the music of the Middle East. And as we do that, we're looking specifically at that North African part. You can see across the top there Egypt and Libya, Algeria, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, to the right, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Turkey. All of that comprises what we think of as the Middle East to the right part, and then North Africa on the rest of that. When we think about that area and what's going on there, we understand that all of the stuff that's happening, the music, the art, poetry, every architecture, everything kind of pushes us into this experience of introspection and contemplation. One of the things that struck me when I was in Jordan a couple of years ago is just how quiet it is. You know, around here we might hear a bunch of cars, or people might be playing their radios. We hear music. If we're walking past stores downtown, we hear music playing. Nothing like that. You could hear sounds, really not even people talking out loud. Jordan, or the same way in Israel, it's really just this region that is steeped in the eternal message, the practices of God. And as we think about what we just looked at in the map, that area is the home of what we used to call, or we refer to as the Fertile Crescent, kind of the birthplace of America. Now, that's not to say that that doesn't include joyousness or passion or emotion. It's just kind of a more contemplative experience for them. So as you think about what has come into mind in the Middle Eastern, you might think of some things like melisma, which is basically one vowel of a word that's sung over several notes, as opposed to syllabic. Syllabic music has one vowel per note when you're singing it. Alleluia, alleluia. Melismatic would have alleluia. And so you'll hear that. You'll hear also, and you think of probably a lot of improvisation in some basic tonal areas. Specific beat patterns, nothing new there. We are talking about beat patterns specific to regions throughout the semester. And then the use of harmonies or tones that we're not used to. Now we see here in the Middle East and in North Africa, quarter tones or semitones or microtones, they might be referred to. So those kinds of things are part of that. Again, this region is really the home, the birthplace of Christianity. Judaism first, of course, but right, we think of Egypt right at the top of North Africa, and Egypt and the eastern part or the western part of the Middle East, Israel, Syria, Jordan, all those places where the discipleship process, the disciples took place, the church was born. Constantinople, the Eastern Church, and then the diaspora is this sense that everybody in the Jewish nation was dispersed throughout the world. They started there and they were dispersed through different processes, migration and military conflict, etc. The Christianity right in that area, as well as the Islamic nation that started with Muhammad in the 500s. So it's an area that's steeped into religious culture, which is kind of why it's more oriented toward that eternal mode. Now, We're going to look specifically at some of the Islamic music and then music in the middle area. Within Islam, of course, there are restrictions, and a lot of the music is, well, pretty much all of the music is religious oriented. Secular music is not something that they're really fond of or they promote. In fact, the government in some instances has outruled music that's not a part of the religious process. This is, and we see that, there are a lot of things that in the past few years we've come to understand as we've seen the different conflicts with the way we think in the West and the way that they think and do things in the East. So basically, really, there's four general areas that we look at in the music. I'm going to skip down to the third one, the muhadan, the second one, the adhan, which is that call to prayer. And really, when you think about it, that's the most familiar sound in most Islamic countries. This is a recording that I made when I was in Jordan a couple years ago again. And this is in the middle of the night, like midnight or so, and I'm listening to the imam over the loudspeakers in Mafraq. There's several mosques throughout the city, and each of them does their call to prayer. And so I was on the back balcony and I caught this one, and then after they wound down, I went to the front balcony and I caught a couple more from over there floating across. You can't really see the video, but you can hear this, just this kind of That's just a brief example of the adhan, this call to prayer. In just a minute, we'll look at a qira, the chanting of the Quran verses. The other two examples of the Islamic music that we're not going to really spend much time on, the muhaddin and the Sufism. If you're curious about those, go online in YouTube and just Google or YouTube the name there, and you'll see a bunch of things pop up about those. Got to kind of wade through to get stuff that really helps out. But the chanting of the Quran verses really is kind of reflective of how the early church did. We talked about this in some other contexts. The early church did the preaching and the sharing as well. In the early church, they had specific tones and tonalities and modes that were assigned different roles. In the Islamic tradition, the different Quran verses had that same kind of thing going on. Get that off there. I'm gonna come over here and listen to this. I'm gonna want to just listen to this. This goes to specifically one of those chants.
Which method did the Prophet, peace be upon him, use to recite the Quran? And the answer is that the Prophet, peace be upon him, didn't recite the Quran in one single way. In fact, every single variation that we see in the Qira'at was recited by the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and he taught it to his companions, who passed it down to those who came after, and so on. So in Surah Al-Fatiha, the Prophet said, Maliki Yawmiddin, and he also recited it like that. Maliki Yawmiddin. And he also read, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامَ. and he also recited it like that. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامَ. So saying that the Prophet...
So in each of those instances, really, he's referring to different scriptures or different passages of the Quran, but he's using this common tonality, this common kira to make that known. And we're going to go on. Come on, catch up with me.
Which method did the Prophet, peace be upon him, use to recite the Quran?
Sorry, we're going to move on here. All right. So that's a rich exploration topic if someday you decide to go into music of other religions and what they do with the Quran and the ways that they illustrate it musically speaking. So some of the instruments, and this is kind of the interesting stuff for me, is just the different instruments that come out of the Middle East. As we study and as I've talked about, the Middle East and some of the instruments are the genesis for musical instruments throughout the rest of the world. We see these and hear in the Middle East, and then they span out across the world. Chordophone, of course, those instruments with strings, the oud and the tanbur, and then some of the European, the kaman, the European violin. We're to listen to some of these and see them and give you a chance to just experience what they sound like. Again, this is nothing that you haven't been able to do, and we've seen these in other situations, so we're going to spend a little bit of time. This is the oud, and Sorma is playing the oud for us. It has two courses. Well, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 courses. The course is 2 strings right beside each other, much like a mandolin. It has 8 strings, 4 sets of 2. That's 4 courses. Very common to have the oud playing what the person is actually singing at the same time. That's what she's doing right here. So you got the keyboard playing, you got the synthetic drum playing on the keyboard.
Yangınlardayım zaman zaman, sorma utanırım, sorma söyleyemem, sorma nöbetlerdeyim, başım duman.
So you hear some of the interesting tonality there, and you hear what could be kind of a minor tone. We'll come to those in just a few minutes where we talk about the theory involved. Oops. This is just like the classroom, isn't it? Stop already. Stop. Oh, poo. It's just going to pieces here. Let me go over here and hit this, because I'm not going to start this over, trust me. Okay, so we're going to go on to the timbre, stop. The timbre is kind of a long instrument, and you'll see it here. Bowed instrument many times. This one he's got sitting upright. So chordophone, it has that sounding bowl at the bottom that excuse me, amplifies the sound. That's enough of that. We're going to go on. And that's what we just did. I'm going to figure this out. The common is kind of like a violin, a string violin. We're going to watch this guy play a little bit. You see the upright common right there. Looks very much like the timbre. The timbre is a series of instruments that have long necks, and the common is a shorter violinist. See how he's playing that? Having a good time. Fun for that. We're going to go over here to a little more modern. This is a group that performs these, and we get to hear a little bit of stuff there. Fun stuff. We're not going to watch any more of that. Let's go on. If I hit that, it's going to be the same thing. So I'm just going to wait on that. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. All right, here we go. Here we go. All right, so also then the voice is an instrument that has some traditions of its own. Low husky, you heard the lady singing, and she sounds more like an alto than a soprano for sure. The reedy timbres are common, are part of their sonority that they enjoy. If you've ever heard, it sounds kind of nasal. We think of it as kind of nasal, kind of maybe harsh, irritating. It's what they do. Melisma, as I mentioned already. And then there's the sakarit, which is this undulation. Let me hear just a little bit of that. Oh, I'm pushing the wrong thing. Never mind. Sorry. All right, so that's that practice. That's from the Northern African women. It's just part of that. Now, circular breathing is a technique in which I'm more familiar with it instrumentally. When I'm playing trombone, you can keep your lips vibrating and the air flowing while you're breathing in through your nose, pushing air out. And it's a very difficult thing to do, but the player continues to speak out and to blow out, making the vocal cords vibrate, while at the same time breathing in through his nose and creating this uninterrupted flow of air. Pretty wild. We'll just let her run her course, and we'll go on. Okay, so the theory behind this is a little more complicated, and that's where we're going to spend just a few seconds here, a few minutes. It's emotional, it's expressive, passionate, and the tarab is the basis for that. Rich music traditions coming from some of the history, some of the Mongols, which is the Mongols are kind of northeast of the Turkey people, south of Russia, kind of between Russia and China. And then the Ottomans were in Turkey around the 1500s. All of those had impacted the music of the area in different ways, and basically landed on what's called the makam in its form now. The makam is a scale that has specific tuning, and as we learned on our last set of scales, when we studied the scale number 3909. There are specific tunings, and then within that you get a bunch of varieties. So it's not just mathematical illustrations, but in the Makam scale, there are 24 notes per octave. Okay, so in our scale, there's 12 notes per octave, in the Makam 24, and they construct the scales in from genes. Now, this is the Makam. As you can see, the gene that they're referring to is a tetrachord, or that's 3. Tetrachord is 4. Trichord, and there's a 2. There's just different sets. So here we have this tetrachord, the Nahawand tetrachord, which is C, D, E flat, F, C, D, E flat, F. And then the tetrachord Hijaz, which is G, A flat, B, C. So if you put these together, this Makam Nahawand would sound like basically what we think of as harmonic minor scale. C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B, C. And then going down, it changes so that it kind of almost mirrors, reflects the melodic scale. C, B flat, A flat, G, F, D, E flat, D, C. So that's just one version of the Nahawand. And of course, that one in itself can be shifted around. Here's an example of that, and this is a guy playing the lute. I'm going to see if, I need to make this bigger for you. Demonstrating on the lute, and he plays it in several different instruments to just give you an idea of what it sounds like. This is the Makam Ajim Ost, whatever. And here we go, a little bit of that.
Nahawand.
Just a different instrument. And that's the more specific, basic Nahawand that we were listening to a moment ago. And the timbre.
Ajam Ushayran.
Okay, great. Okay. So that's the Makam Nahawand, and we're going to listen to it again. Oh, come on. Quit it.
Nahawand.
Quidditch. One day this will be perfect, and you'll be so surprised. You won't have any issues. All right, we're not going to listen to the Nahawand again. Here we are.
Nahawand.
Nahawand. All right, so enough of the Nahawand. We're going to go on now. Shoo! Here we go to the Makam Huzam, which we see a trichord on the bottom, the E flat with the slash through the flat indicates the microtone quality of that. F, G, and that G of the trichord Sika jumps into the tetrachord Hijaz, G, A flat, B, C, which we heard just a minute ago. G, and G, A flat, B, C. And then it goes on up to D, E flat, D, C, the tetrachord Nahawand, which was the C, B flat, A, G, and then the ending on that tetrachord Sika. So you have those little gins put together to create the Makam scale Huzam. And I think that I have an example of that. Let's just see. Yeah. This is the same guy giving us the Huzam. And you can see it illustrated
Huzam.
on the keyboard. And where it falls on the ear. And he's playing a little bit of fun stuff. That's plenty of that, I think. What do you think? Good. That's plenty of that.
هزام
No, not the Huzam. All right, so we're going to go on to other characteristics. Makam, as we just saw, that comprised the same basic scale, and then do some other things. And then there are variations on that, and the non-pulsile improvisation just means that they don't have to follow a particular beat or the pattern. They just, as you heard him illustrating there at the beginning of that, it's a free-form kind of thing. Vocal form, the sire, the path of the makam is a journey. And for much of the music that you hear, as with the opening things that we talked about, where are they? The kira, like the chanting of the Quran verses or the adhan, all of these have some kind of story to them, kind of a path to them, and this sire is an example of that. So we're going to go on then to here we are going to look now at some of the paths that they may take. This is the makam in a taksum. Okay, so the taksum within the makam hijaz on the oud, which means that the taksum is that particular pattern that it follows. You can see the rise in pitch and then the variations that are represented by the little dots over time. And then when it's the makam hijaz, it's that basic scale that we were just listening to. And then on the oud means that it's that instrument. Now what that would sound like for us is like this. Makam hijaz on the oud. Is just that pattern of rising and falling that is playing. I want to point out a couple of things as you're looking at this. Let me get rid of that. You notice here as you're looking at it, there are basically what we see is kind of 6 strings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But if you look to the right of his left hand, where you see the pegs, you can count the pegs, and you see that there are 6 pegs on top and 6 pegs on the bottom. And what that generally means is that for each note, he actually has the 2 strings, or that constitutes one course. And this is a more modern oud with the 6 courses put together. Different ouds have different levels of amounts of courses, and those are time over time have changed. The specifics of those have changed. Now I'm going to hit this and just see if we can go on. Nope, we didn't. All right. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Now we're clucking. Okay, so rhythm is the another component, and there are 2 or 3 rhythmic patterns that we'll look at. You see at the bottom of the screen the tum, tak, and then the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. And the doom is on 1 and 3, and the tak is the and of 1 and the and of 2. And that's the ikwa is a characteristic rhythmic pattern. The maksum is that combination of the beats that happen within that. And it's best illustrated just by listening to it. So here's that. maksum. So you can see that the doom is that hit strike in the middle, and then the talk is the left hand hitting the drum, and then the right hand is the rim of the drum, and the right hand also hitting the rim of the drum. And that is just a very basic ikwa that he's playing for us there. Oh, no. One day, David, one day. Here we go. All right. So the wada, simple quadruple, very similar to the maksum, but it has a different sound. As we listen to this, the doom on the ones and threes again, ma on the third beat of every second group. So this is, he's going to start with the metronome, giving us the tempo that he's going, and then you can hear the doom and the ma. You see the ma right there above that three, right in the middle. So here we go with that.
Un, dos, tres, cuatro.
Not metronome.
Dum, tac, tac, dum, tac, tac, dum.
So just as with the sub-Saharan African music, the different strikes have different pitches that represent different parts. He elaborates and builds on that, but even in the midst of that, you have that constant wada, doom, doom, tac, tac, doom, tac, ma, doom, tac, tac, doom. And on this particular video, he goes, no. He goes crazy later on. So different instruments carry different roles in that. The tambourine having one role, the darbuka another role. And this video that we're going to, well, we're not going to see it just yet. You can see in this illustration how some of that works. You have the basic makam pattern with the doom and tak 1 and 2, and then tak doom right in the middle, and then variation on the maksum pattern. You have the tak popping in with the other tak. This is an illustration of that, and it starts with one drum and then adds a second drum and then adds that third drum, and it tells you what's coming up. It shows you graphically how that looks. We're not going to watch the whole thing. All right, so we're going to 120 beats per minute, and they're showing you the beats. This is the Ikwa Maksum. And the bendir is what's playing this pattern. And you see it happening. This is one drum making it the two different sounds. Then I have the reek. Basically mimicking that first. We're setting up that Ikam Maksum. Now we're going to add in the darbuka. As you're listening to this, you're hearing stresses on different beats by different instruments. And we talked the other day about the polyrhythmic nature, where you have two different rhythms happening simultaneously. Different emphasis at different spots, and this is an example of that. We're going to call it a day on that one. No. Why? Oh, why? Here we go. And then this is an example of the Ika Murasa Shami, which we're not going to listen to, but you can see there the dotted lines indicate the cycle breaking up, and it's a little bit different cycle than the previous one we saw. That's kind of some of the basics of Islamic music, and it's rooted in the Arabic nations. That there's a lot of similarities in that general area. We're not going to look too much at the Arabic music or the Israeli music, but I do want to spend just a moment and look at some of these. You can see there on that third and the second bullet point that there's some different forms. The different forms have names that are specific to their regions, and generally speaking, those are very similar, but there are variations based on where they're from. So in Morocco, the Nuba sounds an awful lot like the Makram in Iraq or the Wasla in Egypt. They're just different names, of course, because they're different countries. Okay, so we're going to move on to, I'm hitting the wrong button, sorry. Some popular music in the Arab world, because it's coming. Popular music. Now we're going to go on to Iran. I like that. Okay. So you can see here on the map that Iran is, this is not a good map for that. Nestled between Iraq on the left and the stands on the right. And the stands on the right have influence from, and we studied those in Eastern Europe, when we studied the Eastern Europe and Russian music. The Iraq and Saudi Arabia and Iran is really the easternmost portion of what we're studying now, the Middle Eastern music. Solo performance over ensemble, focusing on having an instrument that's played and some of the variations that happen with that person as he's playing improvisation. So you see different kinds of classical music, the Datska, the Maya, which is a heptatonic scale. Hepta, of course, is 7. We talked about that last week, upon which that's based. And then you have short related melodies, or the gusha of that. And the pitch collection, the Datska, is what gives it that kind of tonality to it. And solo improvisation, as I mentioned a minute ago, is a very important part of that. The performer would pick a set of gusha from a single Datska, a series of tonalities from that overall tonality, and improvise on each time around. So this is a solo tar in the Datska fashion, and we're picking it up. This is kind of in the middle of the piece. He's already been playing around, and at this point he gets into a particular rhythm pattern. You can see we're starting at 208. So he's kind of hovering around this particular dead style, this particular tonality, and then here he's going to start doing some improvisation work over that. All right, so every once in a while, one of our guitarists will pop in and do something like that, and it's kind of fun to just listen to do that. Oh, here I go. I'm going to be in trouble. I don't want to hear that again. They don't do that necessarily in Ditchka, but they kind of improvise over a particular pattern, tonality, and it's just fun to listen to while I'm working. It's always fun to have somebody practicing while I'm working so that I can hear their musical improvements going on. Just saying. Just saying. All right. Improvisation, the solo. So singers would do some of the kind of the same things. They might not use words so much as just vowels and tonalities, but they would do that as well. Moving on, music in Iran. There's 4 different types of music in Iran. The Pishta, which reminds me that as you're reading, you've got the vocabulary list next to you that you've downloaded from the website, or you've at least put into your Canvas, and you're typing in some of the vocabulary words here so that you can be familiar with those as we get into quizzes. Jewish music, also the same area for its origins, that Middle Eastern area, and then again the diaspora, putting them throughout the world. So when we think of Jewish music today, we have to consider that some of that is influenced by Russian culture, some of that's influenced by German or Eastern or whatever. It just comes from all over the world. And Israel is really the place that they're gathering again in terms of the overall scope of things. And you've talked about that in Old Testament or New Testament classes, so we're not going to go there. But you have some of these basics of religious music in the past, the Levites that we've talked about in other classes, who are the professional musicians back when Moses came down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments, and in that whole second half of Exodus, and in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, where they're establishing the rules and rituals of the celebrations of God. And out of the 12 tribes, the Levites are appointed as the priests, and they have the responsibility for enacting all of these rituals that are intended to draw us into the presence of God. And the Levites do that, and the shofar is one of those instruments that's used to do that, still used in their ceremonies today. It's basically a ram's horn that has a hole in the end so that you can blow through it and sing. The cantor is the person who does the chanting, the cantillation, and that is usually a typical voice type, as opposed to somebody like a lyric tenor or mezzo soprano. A cantor has a particular voice type that is suited for that particular cantillation, and the ta'amin are the little, what we would call rubrics within the music that tell what form is supposed to be done. So way back at the beginning, when we're talking about the Islamic qira and the different forms that are sung with the Quran, this is very similar to the cantillation of the Torah or the biblical text for the Jewish society. And then, of course, different parts of that, the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic, the Hazanat, different areas that bring different ideas to that. The Hasidic movement, which is more of a mystical Jewish thing. And then the klezmer. And this is fun stuff. This is the folk music of the Jewish nation. And that's really some of the more, nowadays, the professional musicians of the Jewish nation, or the klezmers. And there's a great band we're going to listen to just a bit of, the Klezmatics, which is a United States klezmer band. And they do performances around
klezmer meant the person who plays the music. I am a klezmer.
Klezmer musicians were looked down on. You're lower than the waiter because they think they're a drug addict, they're gonna go have sex with my daughter, whatever, you're gonna eat all the food.
Klezmers are just crazy people.
I've seen them do klezmer music. I've seen them do jazz. I've seen them do spirituals. Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger. I mean, taking every component of not just musical styles, but musical styles that have a reason. People really feel a neshama. Neshama is the Hebrew word for soul. There was an old gentleman who said, when you...
All right, so the Klezmatics, that's a group that you could easily check out on your own. There's some other klezmer music that's pretty fun. And if you get a real klezmerish type person, band, a klezmer band, you can get some interesting dancing and stuff like that. All right, so you are taking notes on, as you're reading, on the different words that are part of that, and putting those into your list, as I mentioned a minute ago, listening to some of the sounds. Your text really has some good examples in there, and one of the things that you can do as you walk through this is that your text has certain references that it makes as far as like listening examples, and you can just look that up. So, for example, that's 6. We'll go to 7. The listening guide on page 97 is the Datsker Machur, and you can type that into the YouTube search and find something that represents that, as well as what we do in class. So you can add to the understanding of stuff from around the world. We're going to close out. This is a shofar. This is a group, one of my more favorite groups, Yana. Played them a lot in different classes, and we'll just listen to this Jewish prayer with the shofar.
ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו כי מרחקים אנחנו לך. אוי מתי תמלוך בציון בכל יום בימינו, בכל יום בימינו, אוי לעולם ותשכון ותתקדש, זוהי ירושלימך לדור ודור, לדור ודור, ולנצח נצחים. תראינה מלכותך כדברנו בשירי עוזיך, בשירי עוזיך, ועל ידי דוד, ועל ידי דוד משיח צדקך. ועל ידי דוד, ועל ידי דוד משיח צדקך.
So that's music of the Middle East and with North Africa. When we gather again, we'll look at Eastern Europe, Hungary, Russia, some of the music that came out of there. Have a great weekend, and I will see you later.